Live your life within the moment. And don't go wait until the morning. You never know when it is over. All that I know is we'll get older. So let us dance this night away.
Before we begin, please listen to the following important public service announcement from the Honorable Judy Heumann. Judy was the former United States Assistant Secretary of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services in the Clinton administration and the former U.S. State Department's Special Advisor for International Disability Rights in the Obama administration. Recently, Judy starred in the Netflix documentary Crip Camp.
Hello, my name is Judy Heumann. I'm here today to encourage you to please take your COVID vaccine. And if you have friends and family that haven't, please encourage them also. COVID is to be taken seriously. In addition to taking the vaccine, please use other protective methods. Wear a mask, use gloves, and sanitize frequently. If you need additional information and you live in Eastern Oregon, you can contact EOCIL. Thank you, and protect yourselves and the community.
Welcome to Queer Coded, a podcast by Eastern Oregon Center for Independent Living, a global disability resource and advocacy center. I am your host, Ellen Buxton. Over the course of this series, we will cover a variety of topics related to EOCIL's core priorities: disability actionable research, disability independent living community services, disability crisis and emergency response services, HIV prevention and harm reduction services, disability two-spirit and LGBTQIA+ advocacy and services, HIV community services, and disability water and food security services. Throughout this series, we will be highlighting the experiences of LGBTQ+ individuals, both shedding light on challenges faced by LGBTQ+ community members, as well as celebrating their joys and successes. We will uplift queer voices while fostering visibility and representation. We will be speaking to individuals with lived experience, leaders of global and local advocacy organizations, and people responsible for developing and implementing policies that affect our daily lives, and we will learn from each other along the way. Welcome, Edie.
Thank you.
So good to have you today. Would you like to just kind of introduce yourself with like whatever you want to introduce yourself with? And
Sure.
If that's too much, I can ask you more questions.
Let's do it. Do it. All right. My name is Edie Engelmann. I am a civil engineer by day. That's I went to school for civil engineering, and outside of work, I enjoy outdoors stuff. I have 2 cats at home. I do lots of like 3D printing, 3D modeling type stuff. Yeah, my pronouns are they, them.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
That's all the interesting things, I think.
Okay, very interesting stuff. We can dive right in and either talk about, do you want to talk more about like very specifically civil engineering stuff, or would you like to talk more about gender stuff?
Yeah, I think like the identity gender stuff. Let's start with that.
Yeah.
And we can get into the work stuff.
So can you share with us your personal journey of discovering and understanding your non-binary identity? What were some key moments or realizations along the way?
Yeah, that's such a great question, and I love talking about this. So I think I'll start by sort of explaining like what non-binary is for me and that. So I identify as non-binary, but specifically agender, which I don't know, the best way I've found to explain it is like whatever little plugin people have in themselves that says, you know, I identify with this gender, or I identify with this. I just don't really have that. I'm just me, I'm just a person, and I've really, once I started thinking about it, I've realized I've always felt that way. And what kind of brought me to that was talking with one of my friends who is a trans woman, and talking about her experience shortly after she came out to me and my friend group, about how she's always just felt this sense of being a woman, and like since she was a kid. And for me, I just had that moment of, is that how people feel about gender, right? Like, is that is that common? Do people feel like they identify with a gender and it's not just like a label that we use for ease of access or ease of language? And it was just kind of that moment where it broke that glass for me, where I was like, huh, like I don't feel that. And then from there, it was just lots of, I don't even want to say research, just like scrolling on social media, finding online forums, Reddit, obviously, and reading about other people's experience, and specifically the agender community, and just realizing that there is a community, there is a common cause, right? There's more than just me who feels this way, was kind of my entry into that identity. And so from there, it was kind of, what's the next step? I started using they, she pronouns just to try it out, and realized like they sounded great. And then when people would call me she, it was like, why?
Yeah.
What led you to that, right? Like,
Yeah.
why? What do you see
What
in me?
part of
Yeah.
this
What part of this
she?
is giving she? Because like, let's fix that,
Yeah.
And yeah, so it was just kind of this process of realizing that the way that I felt is not a common experience, but is felt by others, and there's a community and there's language for this, and then kind of allowing myself to practice and use that language and see what felt comfortable. So
Several things from that. First of all, I'm gonna turn pages now. I was like, that's gonna make some noise. But one, I think your experience with gender is like kind of similar to my experience with religion, where like I remember like being told about like the Holy Ghost, and like how like I should feel it in like very specific circumstances and stuff like that, and then like I didn't feel it, and then being like, oh, other people like feel it for real.
Yeah.
And like and then what else? Before I forget, for the listeners, could you talk a little bit more about what agender is, like specifically in comparison to non-binary?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So, and this is all my understanding.
Yeah.
I'm not an expert,
Yeah.
but non-binary is an umbrella term, which basically covers anyone who doesn't feel like they identify with a binary gender, right? Man or woman.
Mhm.
And so non-binary can be anywhere from being gender fluid, where you feel like you fluctuate between feeling more masculine or more feminine, or it can be agender. It can be some kind of split where you identify as like 70% masculine but 30% feminine, and that distinction is an important part of your identity, kind of living in that flow. So for me, like, agender is just that I don't experience gender at all, really. In my I don't know, and it's interesting too, because I'll say like I definitely present more masculine. That's how I feel comfortable. But I don't really feel that that's like a gender expression, the way that I dress, as much as it is just that's how I feel comfortable, right? That clothing or that kind of style is what I feel comfortable and I feel confident in. But I don't know. I don't really see clothing as having gender. Like, I shop in the men and the women's section, and it's really just whatever I feel comfortable in. So yeah, does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah,
a little bit.
And that answers it for me a little bit as well, because I just identify as like regular schmegular non-binary, but I
Sure.
think that's because I haven't like really looked into anything.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it's one of those things where, non-binary is this big group, and there are so many different individual labels and all that, which is amazing that people are able to find that language that expresses their experience. So yeah, for me that's agender, but I know there are so many ways to be non-binary, which is so cool.
Yeah. There's so many. I mean, with like any of the genders, there's just so much room for expression.
Absolutely. Yeah.
How did you first become aware of the concept of non-binary gender? And what was your initial reaction to it?
Yeah. I think that it kind of ties into the last question, in that it was that realization that talking to my friends about their gender experience, they distinctly identified with a gender. And I think for the longest time, I grew up as a tomboy, and I would always like, hang out with the guys and dress a little bit more like masculine or whatever. And um it never was something that I questioned, because it's so common for kids be like, oh yeah, she's just a tomboy, or she does this and this and this, and that's fine. Um and so yeah, once I kind of put two and two together, that like, oh, people actually experience gender, like they really identify with this is important to them, realizing that doesn't happen for me. um that was kind of it. And then from there it was just like typing into Google, like, I don't identify with a gender, like I don't feel like a man or a woman, or anything in between, really. And yeah, finding those online communities, hearing people talk about their experience, that was really it. It was sort of finally having language to explain that feeling, and
For
then
sure.
hearing that other people shared that sentiment.
Yeah, I don't really remember my experience like finding non-binary. I had a similar experience growing up where I was a tomboy and I wasn't like other girls. And I've come to find that that was like a lot of just internalized misogyny of just like not wanting to be like other girls
Yeah.
and just thinking like pink was like gross and things like that.
Right. Being
And-
seen as like weak or feminine, or like
Exactly.
you don't want to play in the dirt because you're a girl. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then so I presented like as tomboy as possible as you can as a child, because you're not buying your own clothes and stuff. And then in college and in high school, I presented like pretty butch. And then I also like was like, ooh, how about they, she? And then I was like, she is really gross.
Yeah.
I actually love they. And then it probably pretty quickly went from they, she. Well, I went like she, they, she, they, them.
Yep. The
The
classic.
pipeline.
Yep.
And yeah. So coming out can be a significant step in one's gender journey. Can you talk about your experience coming out as non-binary? And how did your family, friends, and community react?
Yeah. I think it's very interesting. So I don't think I even registered. It wasn't even a thought in my mind about like questioning gender or anything until I had sort of settled into my sexuality, which I feel is a pretty common experience. And so if it's okay, I'll talk a little bit about my sexuality.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I mean, I identify as lesbian. And I don't know, growing up, I feel like I had the pretty common experience of like having the weird, really close friendships with girls, and just like feeling like kind of obsessed with this person, and they're just like so cool, and I just want to be around them all the time. But I mean, we live in this world of sort of compulsive heterosexuality that doesn't really explain like, oh, that's what a crush feels like, right? Like, so I just didn't really give it space to think about it, or to explore it as what might be a crush. It was just like, this is my best friend, and I would die if they ever left me, right? So
Super
yeah,
chill things.
super chill. And then looking back at the guys that I dated when I was younger, it's very much like, wow, I don't think I had a crush on them. I think they gave me gender envy, right?
Yeah.
Like that guy just like looks cool, I like his hair, I like his style or whatever. And not to discredit the guys that I dated, like they were all great people, good friends, people that I enjoyed spending time with. But at the end of the day, and that was kind of what happened over time, is I just realized like there wasn't really that romantic connection. So I mean, I even went through a period of time thinking, maybe I'm asexual, because I just don't really enjoy, like, some parts of the physical are fine, but others I don't get what other people are talking about when they talk about intimate relationships. So By the time I was about 2.5 years into a relationship with this guy, is the last guy I dated. I dated him through my freshman, sophomore, and into my junior year of college. So I was 20. It was COVID summer. And I think part of what made that relationship last so long is because we were long distance over school and all that. But during COVID summer, we were basically living together back in my hometown. And it just got to a point where I was like, I mean, we're 2.5 years into this, and it doesn't feel like I think it should.
Yeah.
And so I ended that relationship as amicably as I could. Again, he's a great guy, and I am so grateful to have had that relationship. And then was like, well, listen, we know the guy thing isn't working. Maybe we just try it. So I downloaded Tinder. I was on Tinder for about 3 days before I matched with my current partner. And the rest is kind of history. I mean, I was kind of planning on like having a fun summer, but that's how it works out sometimes. And so yeah, that was kind of realizing, well, what I'm doing isn't working. Maybe I'll try this. And then it was, I don't know, how do you even explain it? It's like all the best parts of having a best friend, and then you also have the physical connection. It's like kind of a no-brainer, at a certain point.
Just a win-win-win.
Just a win-win-win. So that COVID summer, I came out to my family as lesbian, and I remember it was more of a surprise to my family than I thought it was going to be. Because I mean, I've always seen myself as being like a tomboy. Like I could like women. I seem like someone who could like women, right? But yeah, I think my family was surprised, but always very supportive, always very loving, and never like it was always support. And sometimes they would say the wrong things, but it came from a place of like wanting to learn or whatever, and that was great. So I think by the time then I was coming out gender-wise, there was enough of them having experienced that learning curve for my sexuality that by the time I came out gender-wise, it was just, that's awesome. We love you. Thank you for sharing, kind of.
Wow, what a beautiful, seamless experience.
Really, really. And I'm so lucky that I have such a supportive family. Like, there was never a point that I was worried about coming out to my family. Which is, I mean, I'm so blessed that that's the case. And when I say that, I guess that's my close family, my mom, my dad, and my sister. And then like coming out to extended family, I think I tried to make it casual, make it easy. Like, hey, by the way, I'm a lesbian, or hey, by the way, I am non-binary, and here's what that means. And again, it was never a question of, oh, are they going to accept it? Are they going to love me? Because they're all very accepting and loving. But they definitely, like my grandparents, I don't think they understand it, which I get. I totally get. And I think in some ways, because I treated it so casually, they don't realize that it is as big of a deal to me as it is. So they're not the best about pronouns or kind of acknowledging that side of things, but there's never been like a lack of support or love. So it's one of those things. And I know I'm not very good about correcting them with pronouns and that kind of thing. And so it's as much on me as it is on them to be sitting in that space where neither of us is addressing it really. But yeah. So coming out overall, especially with close family, has been great. Nothing but support. And like I said, I think having gone through the sexuality sort of transition with my family made the gender one, by the time that came around, it was just that's cool. Thanks for sharing. Like,
Mhm.
what does that mean? And what do you want from us? And how do we support you? Kind of. So,
What a beautiful
yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
I've had a pretty similar experience as well with like came out with sexuality first and was met with support to a degree. My mom had a really interesting reaction. I'm gonna put her on blast. She one said it was a phase, and I was like, "Oh, well, okay, whatever.
She actually,
That's a traditional response. But what got me was she was like, and we all have feelings like that, and I was like, oh, sure. I don't think we do. I think only some of us do. So that was super interesting. But both parents were supportive of sexuality. It took my dad a little bit longer. They're both still currently Mormon. So like they had their own things to like unpack with that. And the church itself has like been a little bit more gracious as of recent. And then I came out like way before with my sexuality. Like I came out at like 16.
Good for you.
And because I was in deep with that tomboy weird crush stuff. I was like, something's occurring.
Yeah.
Something is going on and something isn't normal. So I came out as bi like super early, and then I had no idea about non-binary or any other gender options. Like I didn't even like really fully understand like transgendered like things. Like all I'd really seen was like some comedic outlets on like shows who were like trans or queer. But in like college, I mean, I don't even know if I came out as non-binary until after my sibling did, who's much younger. And then I think I came out kind of as a support for them. And I also struggle with correcting people. Like I don't correct anybody, especially family, because it's just a lot of work. It's just so much work every single time.
Yeah.
But I do correct them for my sibling. Do you have a similar experience with that?
Yeah. So recently my sister came out to us as being a trans woman, which has been so cool to see her blossom into that. I mean, she's still very early on in her experience, and it's so cool to see. And on the one hand, like I know I would correct anybody who like misgendered her, but on the other, I don't know, like the community that we've been in around here and with my family and all that has been so supportive and really good about pronouns and stuff. You know, my parents mess up here and there, and we'll kind of hop in casually with corrections, but nothing is really required like a hard fast like, hey, by the way, or like, hey, this is how it should be, or you know, please use she, her, whatever. But yeah, I do find that it's easier to hop in and correct somebody in defense of someone else than of myself. Yeah.
And I'm sure there's a lot to unpack there for us both.
Yeah. Yeah.
Aren't we correcting people on our own behalf?
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
Can I hop into
Yeah.
sort of talking about that non-binary experience and finding that? I think for me, even as a kid, I didn't really vibe with like, oh yeah, I'm a woman, you know, but I also had the thought, I was like, okay, like, do I want to be a man? And the answer is like, no, like it'd be cool to not be seen as like feminine or weak or whatever, but I don't want to be a man. Like, I don't really like that. So that must mean I'm a woman, right? Like if I don't want to be a man, maybe I'm a woman. And yeah, there was a moment where it clicked. It's like, I don't have to be anything. I can be somewhere in between. I can be one and the other, or I can just be none of it. Like there's no rule that says you have to feel an alignment with a gender. And that was a moment where it's just like, oh, that's how I feel. But yeah, for the longest time it was, well, I know that transgender people exist and feel very strongly that they are the other gender, and I've never had that experience. So I can't be transgender. I must just be a woman, and this must just sometimes be how it feels to be a woman, and that's not the case. So yeah.
Yeah. So with your exploration of being like I don't feel like a woman, so maybe I'm a man,
Mhm.
and then being like, definitely not that. So probably woman. Have you ever experienced any kind of like gender dysphoria?
Definitely. And I think it's tough to say like at what age it really started, but I remember being like late elementary school. I went through a phase where I had this hat that I would wear every day. That's a whole other story.
Mood.
But this is just I just always had the hat on. And then I don't know, we'd have a sub that day and they would like call me young man, like go sit down or whatever. And I'd be like, that's so funny. Like, ha 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 ha. I'm such a prankster, you know? Um, and like just none of that ever bothered me. And in a way it was kind of funny, like, that's funny. They would think that. And so there were always like moments like that where being seen as a guy didn't bother me. Um, and then it was like growing up, um, getting into, you know, the high school age and people going through puberty and all that. Like I never had like a big chest or anything. But I also like, I don't know, I never felt like my chest or my hair were things that like added to my experience of being a human. That makes sense. Like, I don't know. I always enjoyed chances to dress up, going to like school dances or doing band performances and putting on my like concert dress and all that. Like it was fun to have an excuse to look nice and go out with friends, but I never felt like those clothes, like I felt pretty and I felt, you know, it was a fun experience, but it never felt like me, really, at the end of the day. It didn't, yeah, I guess it didn't really add to my experience of like enjoying the event. It was just kind of, oh, you have to wear a dress if you're going to go do this kind of thing. And then I could wear the dress and then go enjoy the thing. Um, so I think I didn't really place that as dysphoria until I started realizing like, hey, maybe I'm like I'm not a woman. And then looking back at that, it's like, oh yeah, I was uncomfortable like
Yeah.
in this clothing because of this or with this presentation. And it was another thing, like as soon as I knew, yeah, I'm non-binary and like she, her pronouns make me uncomfortable and this, it's like, oh, I don't want to have boobs.
Yeah.
Right? Like I have been wearing a sports bra every day since I was in high school and like there's not ever a time that I'm like, wow, I like my chest. I like the way I look with my chest in this clothing or anything. Like it was just a part of my body um that I was completely apathetic about. Um and that at times it was just such an annoyance, you know. It felt like something that I had to deal with every day rather than like something I enjoyed about my body. um and I think even before I'd really come to terms with gender, I had like looked into top surgery and things, and I feel like at the time that I was just looking on like trans men's forums for their experience with top surgery, and it was always like, I don't know, like people's results and pictures were fantastic, but it was like, that is a man. That is someone who identifies as a man, and this is their experience. And that's not really something that I'm looking for, you know, that exact thing. And so it was kind of, you know, it's the same way that, oh, you know, I don't identify as a man, so I must not be trans or I must not want top surgery. That when I started looking into non-binary as a concept and seeing that there are non-binary people who get top surgery and that can look all sorts of ways, that I was like, oh, that's what I want. I want to be non-binary and have top surgery, and I want that to be a unique experience for me. And then it was like as soon as I realized I wanted top surgery, then it felt really dysphoric to have you know, my chest be visible at all. It was like, you know, I opened my eyes to like, that's what my body could look like. That's what I think my body is supposed to look like. And now that I know that, like seeing my body now feels really uncomfortable, doesn't feel right. And so there was about a period of a year where I knew I wanted top surgery and I was actively pursuing it, where I did have a lot of like chest dysphoria, and all of that. And I mean, since I've had top surgery, it's one of the best things I've ever done. Which is really cool. And I think end of the day, that is probably my biggest source of dysphoria. And at least for my gender experience was one of the biggest things in making me feel like I'm the person that I'm supposed to be, and this is comfortable in my body. I think sometimes when I answer the phone and people just assume they'll call me miss or whatever, like that makes me dysphoric because, you know, I am not a woman, but I like my voice. It's just how other people see it sometimes that I don't love. And so I do experience vocal dysphoria, but not to an extent that, at least right now, that I think I want to do anything about it. And yeah, I think when I cut all my hair off, I mean, that was a big step in sort of my gender journey, and not even really a dysphoria way, but just in feeling closer to myself.
For
You know?
sure. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think cutting my hair was just so freeing.
Yeah.
Like it just feels right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just never did anything with my long hair. It was just long
Same.
because that's what you do, right?
Yeah.
You just have long hair. And it was just always just wake up, like
Put it in a bun.
put it in a bun.
Put it in a braid or a ponytail.
Yeah, or just like let
or
it be
leave
flat.
it.
And
Yeah.
I don't know, I didn't take care of it the right ways or anything. It was
Oh, yeah.
just, yeah.
Yeah.
It was just there. And then it was like, oh, maybe I'll cut my hair and we'll see how that is. And now I like to like style it. I've learned how to cut it in different ways and I have fun with it. It's something that is a part of my expression instead of just being on my head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's so cool that you're in a place where you seem really in touch with your body and yourself, and
Yeah.
like you're like finally connected with yourself.
Yeah.
And things are going on a correct track.
Yeah.
So we already talked about what being non-binary means to you specifically and personally. But would you like to talk about how it intersects with other aspects of your identity, like any possible neurodivergency or like your work, etc.?
Yeah. I don't know that I have a super intelligent answer for that one, but I can
okay.
totally like talk about
Yeah.
it. For me, and kind of like I said, it wasn't even a question about, oh, am I not a woman, until I had found a place that I was comfortable with my sexuality and felt really settled in that. And I think I owe a big part of the being able to discover my gender to being in a really healthy and stable relationship where I was loved for exactly who I am and not like how I looked or, how I existed in the world, if that makes sense. Just me as a person outside of identity or anything else. I felt so secure in that I was able to figure out exactly who that was and what they liked and what their thing was and all that. So, I mean, I owe a big part of my gender identity to my sexuality and finding a person who loved and celebrated me. And then I think another part of how I am most comfortable existing in the world is likely due to being neurodivergent. I trying to find the right words to say this, but I think it's like hard for me just to like be a person most days, right? Like just generally, I struggle, and I think I learned at a very young age to mask and to hide certain personality traits or tendencies or quirks that, I noticed people said, oh, that's weird. And so then I didn't do that in person or, in front of people anymore. And that masking, that sort of assimilating and code switching, depending on what environment you're in, is super common for neurodivergent people. And in that way, I think I also learned to do that, like gender wise, where it's like, oh, in this crowd, you should act or be this way. And just being so lost in that and switching to masking as a coping mechanism for being social and being around people meant that I didn't really, for a long time, know what was natural and what was normal for me if I was to drop all of that expectation, whether it was external or self-inflicted. I didn't know what I would be like just by myself without outside influence. And so, like I said, being in this relationship and having a space where I didn't have to act or mask, I could just be myself at all times, started sort of learning what that looked like and what that felt like and how much more I could relax and recharge when I didn't have all of those acts or masks on. And just realizing, like, I really like that person. Like, that person's fun and cool, and it feels good to just drop it all. So yeah, I don't know. I see a lot of ways that my neurodivergence and my gender identity intersect, and I also see a lot of ways that I think that's why it took me a while to sort of realize that I had a different gender identity, because I was just doing my best to blend in for a long time. Yeah, that's kind of, I think, all.
And you were like, I don't have an intelligent answer. So eloquent.
Took me a minute. Had to think through some words there.
Let's see. So society often imposes binary expectations regarding gender roles and presentation. How do you navigate that now, and challenge these expectations as a non-binary person?
Yeah, I think, frankly, I just learned to not care
Yeah.
what other people expected of me, which easier said than done. But at the end of the day, reaching a point that I was comfortable with myself, I like who I am. I feel like I'm a good person and I contribute to society, and I have interesting things to say and add, that it doesn't matter what someone expects of me, when they first see me or they first hear my voice. Doesn't matter what they think or what they think I should be. Just matters that I am true to myself, because I was finally able to like myself, which is so cool.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think I sometimes struggle with the idea that there's more that I could be doing to help educate people when I encounter someone who maybe, they say something or do something that is enforcing that gender binary. And my response so far has just been to ignore that and carry on. But there are opportunities, I think, where I could have said something or educated someone. And I'm maybe not quite at that stage yet, but yeah, I day in and day out, if someone's being, and it often isn't even like malicious, it's just ignorance about other ways of people being and existing in the world. But if someone is kind of enforcing that binary, I just ignore it and I just keep doing me. So yeah, that's really all I all I have to say is yeah, I'm comfortable with myself and I like myself, and at the end of the day, as long as I feel like I'm sticking to that and in a place where I feel good about what I'm doing and saying, then it doesn't really matter what other people think.
Okay, so self-care and community support are vital for individuals exploring their gender identity. What resources or communities have been particularly helpful for you in your journey? And what advice would you give others seeking support?
Yeah. Communities are super important. I think that's so important. So anybody who's seeking support, I'll just say, like, you're not alone. No matter what your experience is, even if it's even if it's a thought no one's ever had before, I guarantee you there are people out there who are going to be supportive of it and give you that space to explore it and be safe and all of that. So you're never alone in wanting a safe space to be yourself.
For sure.
I think, like I said, Reddit is such a good resource. I'm part of, oh my God, what is it? It's r/Freed the Nips, which is a top surgery subreddit specifically around people who didn't get like nipple grafts, and they're just, which has been so cool. It's predominantly non-binary people, but so many trans men are also in that subreddit, and it's just really cool. I think that page, you see a lot of different gender identities and expressions and all kinds of folks on there. Everyone's super supportive and willing to share anything from their gender experience to their top surgery experience and all of that. I've found a couple like Facebook groups for people specifically in Oregon who are getting top surgery, and around the time that I was getting top surgery, there were a couple of people who were, a couple of days ahead or behind me, and we started a little group chat just so we could all check in on each other and our healing progress and how we're feeling, all that, which, I mean, it's just nice to have other people who are going through what you're going through to talk to. And then, yeah, I think I've been really surprised. I've been living in Eastern Oregon now for almost 3 years. I've been so pleasantly surprised by the community out here. Even just out and about every day, I feel like I get a lot more support. And someone today, I've got a non-binary pin on my hat, and they were like, I like your pin, just that kind of thing. I feel like I get way, way more of that than someone. I don't even think I've ever been like, hate crime is such a strong word. I don't know what the like the casual version of that is, but
perhaps a bias incident.
Yeah. Like I don't even think anyone's ever been like outwardly rude or like attacked me verbally or anything. Which has been cool. And not to say like I expected it necessarily, but I wasn't sure what it would be like out here. So yeah, if anything, I think like the worst of it is just people that keep to themselves, and that's fine. But yeah, I've found such a fun community between my partner works in the nonprofit zone, so there's so many local resources tied to her nonprofit work for housing and for LGBTQ support and all kinds of things. That's been a massive source of community. And then, yeah, just meeting people. Everyone has been so friendly, and there are so many other LGBTQ plus people out here that, yeah, it's so cool to have friends and support in a community, in both in person and online and all kinds of spaces. So I think it takes a little bit of putting yourself out there and understanding to an extent who you are and what you're looking for. But once you find people that are open and accepting, it's such a safe space to then further explore your own identity. Yeah. So I would encourage everybody to look for community and find support in those spaces.
And there's, with the internet, there's just so much access to community now.
Absolutely.
And then also, personal plug, if you're seeking community in Oregon, or honestly anywhere at this point, but EOCIL does have an LGBTQ plus adult peer group and an LGBTQ plus youth peer group. We also have a GSA collaborative for folks in GSAs who are seeking community, just because the schools are so rural and isolated here. And then we also have our LGBTQ plus youth advisory network, where youth can advocate for their communities and just connect with other advocates, and also tell me how to do my job better. Bless them for that. But yeah, there's also like Reddit and Tumblr and Facebook, and there's just so much room for community.
And the Grand Pride Family Fun Day, June 4th.
June 4th. Absolutely. I mean, if we want to get into it, well, there's EOCIL is having a Pride event in Ontario on May 31st. People should totally go to that. And you can reach Mary Ellen Buxton at eocil.org for more information on that. There's events in LeGrand, there's events in Pendleton, there's events in Baker and Wallowa. Yeah, there's just so much community in Eastern Oregon, and you wouldn't even expect it. Like I know I didn't.
Yeah.
And it's taken me like I've lived in LeGrand for the last 6 years, and it's taken time, and it really does take putting yourself out there in order to find people, because everyone is minding their own business and just trying to stay alive out here. So like you have to like be visible in order to find other people. Yeah.
And I think too, I'll add, you don't have to know exactly what you're looking for. You don't have to have things figured out before you're able to find people with similar experiences. Like you can know that you're questioning your gender, you're questioning your sexuality, and find people who have been there.
Yeah.
And they know exactly what that feels like. And no matter what conclusion you come to, like they'll support you. And I think that's really cool. It's specifically the LGBTQ plus community, because in some way we all have to go through that process of breaking like compulsive heterosexuality in ourselves, or like gender norms in ourselves. Like we all understand what it's like to be unsure. You know, it's so cool to hear other people's experiences on that, and everybody you talk to will have a different story and a different perspective, and you'll learn things from people. So even if you're cis and straight, like ask people about their experiences and you'll learn so much. I think that's so cool.
Oh yeah. And people love talking about themselves.
Oh my God.
So feel free to ask.
Yeah.
Also, it's a little late in the game, but would you like to tell listeners a little bit more about compulsive heterosexuality? Because that's just like obviously like I've looked into it, but not everybody has.
Yeah. Again, this is me as a casual person in the world, not an expert, but my understanding of compulsive heterosexuality is just the assumption that we have in our society that people are straight.
Yeah.
And it's sort of this idea like you're straight until you realize like, oh, I'm actually attracted to this type of person or whatever. And then that requires coming out to people, because until you come out, you're assumed to be straight.
Yeah.
And that just gets so ingrained in us from a young age that, oh yeah, men date women and women date men, that like for me, you don't even question it. You think you're asexual before you think you're gay, because oh, I'm supposed to date men, but I don't really like dating men, so guess I'm asexual, you know?
I think that's so interesting that you were aware of like a queer identity like asexuality, and you were like, yeah. before even exploring the possibility of gay.
Yeah. And so that's kind of like comp het is interesting like that, where it's just an assumption. It's a blanket statement. And kids internalize that so heavily that I don't know, they feel like something's wrong with them, or they feel like they're broken, or they feel like they have to be this way because that's just how it is. That's the safe way to be. That's the right way to be. Yeah.
Thank you for your insight and your definition.
Yeah.
I was just like, people probably don't know what comp het is. But looking to the future, and we'll kind of wrap up gender stuff. I mean, everything's going to be gender stuff, but we'll pivot to career stuff in a second. But looking to the future, what changes or advancements would you like to see in society to better support and affirm non-binary individuals?
Yeah. I think it really just comes down to awareness. It would be so awesome to live in a world where, you know, comp het wasn't the norm, or the idea that there's a man and a woman and those are the two genders isn't the norm. Like, just I would love to see a space where kids get to grow up and be exactly who they are without feeling like they have to fit inside boxes. Especially when it comes to like non-binary identities. It is such an expanse of internal feelings, and it's so dependent on an individual's experience that it's impossible to put that in a box. And so letting kids and young adults and anyone have the space to just be themselves, and that being okay no matter what that looks like, would be amazing. And I don't know, there's a certain point at which I think just more education on gender identities and sexualities, whatever that looks like. It doesn't need to be formal, but just a conversation that parents have with their kids to let them know, like, hey, there are these other things out there, and this is what they look like, this is what they mean. And yeah, it would just be cool for every person to have the chance to find themselves without outside influence. Which, big ask, but I think the more that we normalize, I feel like we're at a point in society now, I like to think so, that it's perfectly okay to like be gay, people, it's so widely accepted. It's like as soon as someone knows, they're like, oh, that's cool, tell me about your partner. And we're not quite there with gender yet, where it's just there's not enough media representation or education. It just hasn't been around as long in the mainstream, that there are some people who just, they don't know what non-binary is. And that was me, So yeah, more awareness, more representation, more education, I think, is just the key to kind of hitting that point where you can just be you, and that can have a label that you identify with, or it can just be whatever you want it to be, and that's okay. But moving past that point of looking at someone, taking in their appearance and how they act and talk, and automatically saying, oh, that's a man, or that's a woman, or they're straight, or they're gay. Getting to a point where you let someone explain themselves and their identity to you rather than assuming would be sweet.
That'd be nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember, I don't know, probably like 2016 to like 2018. I remember it was like a big joke to like, it was a joke about like assuming gender. I don't know if you remember, like, maybe I experienced it more like working in fast food, specifically with like gendered toys, but like people would like assuming children's gender. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I feel like just, I don't know, gendering children less would be absolutely fantastic.
Would be so great.
Like if they could just be kids,
Yeah.
that'd be super great.
Yeah.
And not to be like such a huge party pooper, but like maybe less gender reveal parties would be really cool.
Yeah.
Just like, and I get it, it's so fun and exciting to like celebrate like your new child. And there's other ways to do that besides like putting on blast what their genitals are.
Yeah.
Like that's like when you really like zoom out and like look at the bigger picture, it's like that's kind of weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's such an importance in our society placed on like, oh, you're a man, this is how you connect to other men, is you be manly and you
or rather how you
sports
don't connect to other men.
Right. Yeah. Like if you want to connect with your peers, you have to be manly and you have to do sports, you have to drive a big pickup truck. And so then you go out and you have a kid and you want to connect to that kid, and you say, oh, they're going to be a boy, they're going to love trucks, and I get to connect to them this way now. And you're like just perpetuating that idea that this is how you connect with people of your same gender, right? But yeah, I think just letting kids be kids, yeah, like the gendered toys and stuff.
Yeah.
I remember going through the drive-thru and asking my mom, like, ask for the boy toys.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted.
I want the Hot Wheels.
Yeah, give me the Hot Wheels, give me the Transformers. Like, but yeah, not assuming, especially for kids, just letting them be kids and have their own personalities, whatever that looks like, would be awesome.
Also, it's so interesting that we're saying let kids be kids, because that's like a direct quote from like the other side.
Right.
Of
That
like,
we're indoctrinating the
just- yeah,
children. Yeah.
let kids be kids. And it's like, well, you're the one imposing gender on them, like telling them exactly how their life should be based off of their genitalia, you know?
Yeah.
It's all just so interesting.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah.
I think that was a big part. This is kind of jumping backwards, but of unpacking gender for me is understanding, I don't know, there's like, I found a TikTok one time that explained it in a way that I really like, but there's like 3 different sort of zones of expression where it's like your personal identity is a spectrum of maybe masculine to feminine or somewhere in between. And then there's your outward expression, how you dress. And then there's like how you want to be perceived as a whole, you know, in the world.
Do you know about the genderbread person?
No. Yeah,
I'm
fill me
I'm
in.
gonna pull it up for you.
Yeah.
But for listeners, the genderbread person is just like an activity to kind of explain the difference between gender identity, gender expression, sexuality. But it looks like this. So like it's this little genderbread person, or like a gingerbread man. Ugh. And it's got like a little brain, and that's your identity, and then it's got a little heart, and that's your attraction, and then it's got like the like sex symbol, and that's like your sex, and then there's like the whole outer expression, and each thing is broken down into like spectrums. So like gender identity starts from like 0 to womanness and 0 to manness, and like you can put yourself wherever on either spectrum. Like you might be at like 0 womanness and like some madness or like whatever. And then there's gender expression, and it starts at 0 to feminine and 0 to masculine, and you can just put yourself wherever. And then there's biological sex, and again, you can put yourself wherever on there. And then there's sexually attracted to, and it starts at nobody to woman, femme, or females, and then nobody to men, masculine, etc. And now it's broken down from there's sexual attraction as well as romantic attraction, and that those are 2 separate things. Another EOCIL plug, we do safe zone trainings, and this is one of the activities in the safe zone training, and we just show it to people and explain it, and then like have people put themselves on their little spectrums, and it just helps people better understand that like sexuality and gender aren't the same thing. Gay doesn't mean anything about your gender, you know, etc. But yeah, the genderbread person
That's so cool. That's exactly where I was going with that.
yeah.
Is that gender is it's different for everyone, but it's a combination of so many different factors of how you feel on the inside, how you feel most comfortable presenting, how you want to be seen, who you're attracted to and who you're not attracted to. And yeah, it's so many different things.
So many different
just things. Other than feeling like you're, you know, a man or a woman or somewhere in between. Yeah. Yes, that's awesome.
Yeah, we're all an onion, and there's so many layers.
Yeah,
there's
all
so
the
many
layers. You'll never run out of layers.
Yeah. Okay. So I have a few questions pertaining to like your career. Would you like to speed run them a little bit, or would you like to have a part 2?
We can speed run them and then maybe also do a part 2.
I like that. Okay. So, we talked about community and stuff. Now, mentorship and support networks can be crucial for professionals, especially those from underrepresented communities. Have you found support within the civil engineering community? And if so, how has it impacted your career?
Yeah. Just as a general statement ahead of all of this, I am very fortunate to work at a company that is not only very accepting, but is actively pursuing initiatives related to mentorship, related to DEI and B, or diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And I've been able to be part of a lot of those initiatives. So, I've seen firsthand how many people care about it and what we're doing to sort of advance those things. So, I think I'm in a pretty unique position that, as far as I'm aware, I'm in the vast minority of like transgender individuals at my company. And so in that way, I haven't found a whole lot of community in the workplace, specifically in that realm. But it's been cool to find people who are passionate about LGBTQ rights and want to be good allies and are seeking to learn about those things. And then I'm part of a mentorship program that I think has been super helpful, career-wise, and just advancing like my personhood, learning lots of different things. So I don't think I have a whole lot to add that's related to gender, but I am very fortunate that my company cares about mentorship and the people within the company.
Yeah. What advice would you give to other LGBTQ individuals who are considering a career in civil engineering, or are currently navigating the industry?
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot of insight into civil engineering as a whole. The company that I'm with is the first place I applied to out of college. It's the only place I've ever worked that like 40-hour work week, big kid job. But that said, I think there is generally across every field a push to or a push for companies to realize that the more you support your employees, the happier they're going to be there. So anybody who is LGBTQ plus or in a position where they're a minority in their field, be yourself, be loud and proud, and see where you can help to educate or be part of the change. Find a place that encourages you and your ideas and gives you a platform to help participate in that positive change, I think.
And of course, that's not necessarily an option for every person.
Right.
But if you are safe, and secure, representation is just always beneficial. And just visibility is always beneficial. And it's important for like youth to see openly queer people in like professional settings. It's important for other professionals to see queer people in professional settings.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do want to once again acknowledge I'm incredibly privileged in my family and my support in the job that I have. Incredibly privileged. So I'm able to be in this space where I'm safe enough to be myself and speak out and rally for positive change. And I totally recognize that's not possible for everybody. But if you find yourself in a position where you are able to educate or change or rally for change, even in just one person at a time, the more other people see and experience something that they don't understand, the more that it becomes safe to be different. Yeah.
As an LGBTQ plus, but specifically as a non-binary person, working in a traditionally male-dominated industry, what challenges have you faced, if any, and how have you navigated them?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest challenges across the board is just getting the leadership to acknowledge that the industry is traditionally male dominated. And I like to think the company that I work at is getting there, realizing that that's a thing, and they're kind of asking the question like, well, what can we do about that? And that's a big question too. I don't have the answers necessarily, but yeah, I think just getting people and organizations to recognize that bias, that this is a group of people that is in power and has power over the minority is a big first step. And then, yeah, like I said, coming up with, well, how do we change that is such a big thing to break down. But I think it just starts with support for the minority and making sure that just because things are the way they are doesn't mean that's the best way for everybody. Maybe that's just the best way for this traditionally male dominated, party that's in the majority. So, yeah, I don't know. I feel like, we've reached a point in society where like we recognize broadly, yeah, women can be engineers and women can do anything that a man can do. And now it's also realizing, well, if women can do it, then anybody can do it who identifies no matter how they identify. And I think we're still not quite there, but I think I'm hoping that places are starting to recognize that and at least be aware of it. You can't fix something you're not aware of. So that's kind of the first step.
Yeah, before the majority can help the minority, they have to acknowledge that there is a majority and a minority.
Exactly. Yeah. And then just what is the best way to support people, I think is so individual, and really just being open to asking that question and saying like, hey, what can we as the people in power or the people in majority do to support you is a huge first step. So I guess second step at that point. But.
Yeah. Could you share a particularly rewarding or memorable project you've worked on and how your identity may have influenced your contribution to it?
Yes. Once again, this isn't so much engineering related as it is just kind of company culture and all that related. But for the last 2 years or so, there's been an effort within my company to create a networking group specifically for underrepresented communities, but it started as a women's networking group within the company, which is obviously incredibly important. And I'm so glad that was kind of where things started. And the person who was organizing this committee had come and talked to our young professionals group about their vision for it and just where they saw it going, and kind of asked for feedback. And I reached out and I said, hey, this is amazing. I'm so glad that this is happening. It could be good to consider either expanding this to be for women or minorities or other, kind of gender identities outside of. And this is where I was even like, you kind of reach a point where you're just saying like, this is a group for people who are not men, and that's not what we want either, right? But that was kind of what I had pitched, is just, hey, this is amazing, but it is still excluding certain groups of people who might be seeking similar support. And through that, I've been able to kind of be part of this committee that is now just turned into, it's called the Connect Committee. And it's got a couple different initiatives within it, but it's just meant to be a space for anyone who's seeking connection, seeking mentorship, seeking, like more assistance or help or education or whatever, to reach out, and the committee just helps facilitate those connections, which has been really cool. And, it was never my intention to take away from like a women's group, but the idea is that this committee can then facilitate a women's support group or facilitate a group for people who want to learn about how to be an ally in the workplace or something like that. So it's been really cool. And I feel like I just came in with some like, hey, maybe do this. And then I was invited because of my perspective of being not a man or not a woman, like, how do we include everybody, or how do we make it a space that anyone can participate in? So me being gender nonconforming was such an asset in that nobody else really had that experience or had talked about it and opened their eyes up to that perspective. So that's been super cool. And I really, really enjoy all the projects I get to do that are related to that group.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
And that made me think of something. One issue, so circling way back, my mom has really struggled with mine and my siblings' pronouns, for different reasons for each of us, because I'm assigned female at birth and my sibling is assigned male at birth. And so my mom, her angle for like struggling with my sibling is like, well, the family name, someone must carry it on.
Oh boy.
And then with me, it's some of the similar stuff, but also I've found with like my own experience and then also in a like with other people, there's like elder feminists that really, really, really struggle with they, them like culture because they fought so hard for it to be he and she, and now we're making it they. And that's just a new problem, an unexpected problem. And yeah, did you face any like backlash for taking the women's group and making it more than a women's group?
So luckily,
Uh-huh.
I was sort of introduced to the concept when it was really just an idea. And I think if it had been an established women's group and I came in and I said, hey, actually, this should be for everybody, or this should be this,
Uh-huh.
maybe there would have been some backlash. So I think just the timing of it was fortunate in that it wasn't widely known yet and it wasn't really fully fleshed out. It was just kind of an idea. That helped. And then I really tried to approach it sensitively and just say, like, this is amazing and this, we do need this, but also maybe we can start another group for this type of thing. Or is there a way that we can just change the language of this a little bit so that it can be more inclusive? And it wasn't like, I tried not to say, here's what we need to do, or this is what it should be. It was just, hey, I just want to point out or make you aware of that this is a step in the right direction, but is still excluding other groups of people or can be seen that way. And I think the other fortunate part of it is the person that I was talking to was very receptive and was looking for that feedback. I think sometimes people come out with an idea and then they want that to be the idea. And if they hear feedback, they're not really open or receptive to it, but that wasn't the case here. And that's was really helpful.
Mhm.
This person, they just really wanted all that feedback and they wanted people who had ideas or had suggestions. So it was a combination of the right timing and the right people, I think.
Mhm.
But that is really interesting. I think
Uh-huh.
that kind of idea of like elder feminists who are offended by people rejecting femininity, you
Mhm.
know, they fought so hard for it to be cool and like powerful to be a woman, and it is.
Yeah.
That's just not everyone's experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just something I wanted to
Yeah.
bring up. And then also just another little tidbit.
Mhm.
I find it interesting that I call it lady brain, as a non-binary person.
Yeah.
Sometimes like my like internal programming, like when you were bringing up very valid and important suggestions and you were like, oh, maybe instead of being like, I know that this is necessary, just a little internal programming that like it's so hard to escape. Like I've really had to be so intentional about like not apologizing for things that shouldn't be apologized for and things like that. But yeah, just a little lady brain that I noticed.
Right. Yeah. No, that's so real. I've seen so many people online like learning to email like a man.
Yes.
periods and short sentences and like
I
no
know.
sign off, and I'm just
Yeah.
like, I can't imagine. But
Yeah. No exclamation points.
right, like how is anyone supposed to know that you're not angry at them?
Yeah. Whenever I use the period, there's a 50% chance that there's a heart emoji or a smile emoji in the email.
I've had to explain to my dad how threatening his ellipses are, his like ... at the end of every text.
I've learned that there's a generational difference, and that like for some older people, the ellipses is like when we do like if we were to say hey with like 3 E's,
Yeah.
that's the same thing as them saying hey ... But
Right.
we're like, oh my god.
I'm threatened. You're threatening me.
Yes.
Yeah, no, that's how he's explained it to me too. He's like, oh, I'm just saying like I'm inviting conversation. Like this is the subject isn't over. Like if you have something to say, you can say it. Or like
I think it's like this also the same thing as if we were to say like hey and like
the eyes.
maybe like a little squiggle or something.
It's an inflection. It's a tone indicator. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's just leaving an openness. But
Yeah.
those dots, oh my god.
Yeah. But yeah, you're so right. Like there's an expectation placed on women to be very like
Very apologetic and very
and
gentle,
accommodating.
sweet, accommodating.
Yes, you don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, and so even just the way that we
And
talk
you
textually like
yes.
is imbued with that need to like comfort and not stir the pot. And you're right, like when I sent that email, it was very like just a suggestion, take it or leave it, this and this and this, where like
I could be wrong though.
right, like, I could be wrong, maybe no one's offended by this and it's just me, I don't know.
Yeah.
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 Also, yeah, lady brain, same thing as girl dinner, like
Yeah. Some things are like they're like not gender neutral, but they are.
Yeah.
But
Everybody has girl dinner.
Yes. Let's see. I think I've got just one final thing, and it's looking to the future. What changes or advancements would you like to see in the field of civil engineering in terms of LGBTQ plus inclusion and representation?
Yeah.
And you kind of talked about that already.
Yeah. I'll kind of just recap on it. And again, this isn't really civil specific. I think it's just general workforce, you know. I think the more that people accept the task of educating themselves or accepting education from others on things that they just don't understand, the more that you can empathize and understand other people. And that can be about gender, that can be about sexuality, that can just be about regional things. Like it doesn't have to be a topic that's considered controversial, but the more that you open up yourself in your worldview to learn about other people's experiences, it makes you a better leader, a better communicator, a better listener. Like you're just you are better at working with other people, right? Because it doesn't matter who they are or what their experience is, you know, you're open to learning about that, or you have learned about it, so you're able to use language or whatever that makes them more comfortable. So I think end of the day, I would just love to see more initiative from people who, you know, they don't understand LGBTQ plus issues. They don't understand different gender identities, and they go out and they try to learn, right? Whether that's just Google searches or trying to talk to someone who has those different experiences. It would be so cool if that onus wasn't on the person who is different to educate others, but rather, you know, that person realizes what they don't know or what they're ignorant about and tries to learn on their own, or at least make themselves a safe space to be educated by others. I think that's kind of some of the work that I'm trying to do with this connection group, is to find the right way to educate people about how to be a good ally in the workplace, or just what it means to have an identity that's different from something super binary or something. That way, it's not even like a thing, that people have to avoid or have to like tiptoe around, because you kind of understand what it means and why it's important to some people, even if you don't. It's not important to you specifically. You can understand why it matters to others. Yeah, that general idea.
And gosh, that would require like a whole cultural shift of like being like, it's okay to not know things. It's okay to
Yes.
also be just wrong and to move forward from that.
Yeah.
Like it's okay to learn.
Yeah. And I mean, I'll say, like, as an LGBTQ person, the people I feel most comfortable with are the people who have told me, like, hey, I'm gonna say the wrong things, but it comes from a place of I want to understand. You know, and that's great. Say the wrong things, ask weird questions, as long as I know that your intent is to learn and to understand me or this idea better. Like, I'm happy to get through that awkward, like, oh, that's a weird question, but here's how, you know, what I would think of that. An example, one of my coworkers, when he first started, he works in a different office, but I work with him regularly, like over Teams and all that. And then I have my pronouns in my email signature. So I think over time he just kind of picked up like, oh, this person uses they, them pronouns. Cool. He sent me a Teams message one time and was like, hey, so weird question, but I'm trying to learn here. On casual Fridays, my daughter just got me this shirt and it says, I identify as grandpa. and I just wanted to know, like, would that bother you if I wore it, or like, is that insensitive? And I was like, first of all, thank you. Like, no worries, not offended. Thank you for asking the question. And secondly, like, no, I think that's funny. And I think just the fact that you came to me and had this conversation means that like your heart's in the right place. It doesn't feel like a target or like you're trying to make a statement. It's just something funny. And then, yeah, he continued the conversation, was like, yeah, you know, it's actually my daughter and her wife, they just adopted this kid and blah, blah, blah. And then I was just like, oh, okay, yeah. Like, it's so okay for you to wear that shirt. And it just, I don't know. But that kind of, he had to start with, hey, like, this might be an insensitive question, but I'm trying to learn. That's, if you're trying to learn, then I think that's the most important thing. And then it's okay to be wrong because you're trying to learn. Yeah. So that's really what I'd like to see generally in society, in culture, in the workplace, is people who just want to understand others and then take that responsibility upon themselves to be educated, so that when they encounter people who have different life experiences, they can be more open, more understanding, more empathetic, and it doesn't put the person who is different in the position of having to say, I'm different and here's why and here's what it means, because it's exhausting.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. Well, I feel like we're absolutely at time. We're absolutely at time. I'm not sure what time we started, but it's absolutely time to finish. But thank you so much for your time and your insight and your knowledge, and for being open to sharing your experience. Listeners can find more information and resources at eocil.org. And EOCIL will be producing an educational Pride series and putting it out throughout June. It'll be on Zoom. Again, you can find more information by reaching out to Mary Ellen Buxton, Buxton, at eocil.org. But yeah, I think that's about it.
Awesome.
Thank you for being on Queer Coded, and thank you for listening to Queer Coded.
Live your life within the moment.
And that wraps up another episode of Queer Code with Mary Ellen Buxton. I just want to give a huge shout out to them. They've done an amazing job so far guiding us through this season of Queer Coded. If you have any questions about any of the content or materials throughout this episode, we highly encourage you to either reach out to Mary Ellen themselves or check us out online at www.eocil.org. Or you can even interact with us on any one of our various social media platforms, whether that be Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. So please find us through any one of those social media outlets, and we'd be happy to help. We also have 4 different office locations throughout Eastern Oregon that you're more than welcome to drop on in, ask your questions. about anything that's related to this episode or just about our general services. We have office locations in the Dalles, Pendleton, LeGrand, and Ontario. And like I said, we would be more than happy to welcome you in, answer any and all of your questions. So with that, thank you, Mary, for another amazing episode. And this has been a podcast by Eastern Oregon Center for Independent Living.